Hey everybody, I'm Mr. Wright, and welcome to Wright at the Movies. Today I'm talking to one of the directors of Killing Poe. I just saw your movie, and it was easily one of the best movies I've seen at the festival. It was really, really good.
Wow, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, I've seen quite a bit, and I had the most fun with it. Like there's a lot of pretty like really beautiful like simplistic stuff. It was really great cinematography, and but it still feels sort of cheap sometimes, and to be understood. It's a lot of new directors, but you guys felt like a Hollywood kind of movie, and it was really cool. Had a bit of a Wes Anderson mixed with Edgar Wright kind of feel.
Edgar Allan Poe, yeah.
And Edgar Allan Poe as well,
Yeah.
yes. What is the movie actually about, just for the audience?
Okay, so the basic story of Killing Poe is that you have these five college students who end up in a class on Edgar Allan Poe. Some of them are there intentionally, some of them are there not so intentionally, but they're all stuck in this class, and even though they're very different characters, they all start to be united around a hatred for their professor, who is a burnout, disgruntled, jaded professor who really just makes their lives miserable. And as he keeps on pushing them further and further to this breaking point, the class dwindles in size until they're the sole survivors left who are able to, put up with him. And when he pushes them to the breaking point, they hatch a plan, try to get even, try to set things right, and it doesn't quite go as they expect. And once things spiral out of control, they find themselves in the midst of a cover-up. And paranoia ensues, and things just go from there.
Right.
So, as dark as some of that might sound, though, as you know, it's definitely a comedy.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about it being a dark comedy because it's got these elements of conspiracy and dare we say it? Well, I guess it's in the trailer, right? That Lynch ends up dead, Lynch being the professor.
Well, it's based on an Edgar Allan Poe kind of thing, so you would expect death and murder of some kind.
You would expect conspiracy, death, murder, darkness. But despite as dark as those things might be, it is really comedic through and through. And so it's really meant to be a good time. And at least based on the audience reaction last night, it sounded like everybody had a really good time watching it, which is what we wanted.
Right. I loved it. What other kind of influences have you had other than Edgar Allan Poe that you wanted to put in this?
Yeah, so I had mentioned some folks had mentioned some of these pop culture tropes, and there's a lot of them in there. So while there are all these Poe themes in it, you have influences from Wes Anderson as one of the cinematic influences, where there's these various homages, sometimes the very sort of flat composition of the cinematography is meant to be that's right. That shows up pretty frequently in the film. But then there's also these tips of the hat to John Hughes, so things, Breakfast Club and these sort of ensemble 80s films. There's a lot of that's in there in terms of influences. As well as a lot of other television tropes. So I'd mentioned that when we first started talking about, well, how do you take Edgar Allan Poe and you mix it with comedy and you put it in the context of another story, some of the first things that came to mind were actually The Simpsons Halloween episodes. And so The Simpsons had an influence on it. There's a tip of the hat to there with a diorama, if anybody is familiar with Martin's Telltale Heart diorama. And then there's also there's references to Who Shot JR, right? So at one point, certain people are talking about things, and there's a flashback, and even just the wave ripple wave ripple transitions, and the sound effects that go with that are meant to be direct, references to old TV shows. Certain things in the score, right? There's some conspiracy moments sneaking, around, and the soundtrack goes very Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers Looney Tunes. There's a security guard in there who's meant to be, very Scooby-Doo. And so a lot of these things, they just show up over and over. And then also pulling in certain things that are just unique to my experience growing up in the Chicago area. One of the dark elements that comes in, which is I find rather humorous. I grew up in the Chicago area. Folks may be familiar with like Elvira, right? You know, the horror host. But there's actually hundreds of these horror hosts on public access. I grew up, Svengoolie was the one in the Chicago area where I was. And we have the Kenosha, Wisconsin horror host, Dr. Destruction from Crimson Theater, and he shows up as Dr. Destruction.
That's cool.
You know, one of the characters is an avid viewer of that television show, and so we brought in that subculture, which I thought, I don't know if I've seen this subculture show up in any movies, but you know, it was influential on my, you know, on me as I was growing up, and so there's just tons of these pop culture tropes just packed into it, and a lot of them are rather subtle, maybe just names of certain characters or things like that. But yeah.
So like, how long did production take? I'm just the filming. I mean, like, how long did filming take?
It was only if memory serves, I want to say it was a 20-day shoot, actual shoot days, right? There were days off in there, so it was close to a month. I would have to go back and look at the actual schedule, but it was close to a month in terms of actual shoot time, and then post-production ended up taking longer than we wanted, but part of that was due to the fact that we had done a number of audience test screenings. So when we had our initial cut of it, we did some test screenings at certain conventions, just to test and see how audiences respond, and then went back and revised the edit and so on. So conventions, colleges, we did a lot of these sort of private arranged screenings just in order to see how folks responded until we had the edit that we thought, okay, this has the right pacing, because it's really written and shot with a view to being consistently funny, well, up until it's not supposed to be funny anymore, but and so it's meant to be that the laughs really don't stop, and it has that sort of sustained humor to it. And so whenever we would watch audiences, you know, we'd show it to audiences, these closed sort of non-disclosure audiences. It was always with this view to saying, okay, let's watch the reaction. Does it ever dip at any point in the humor? And if so, what can we do to fix that? How can we either revise that, up that, cut that down, or whatever? Until we landed at something that seemed to have a pace that didn't let off in terms of the humor, and I think we got where we wanted to go with it.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, and like, there's a lot of comedies that try to get serious at the end, and it kind of ruins it for me most of the time. You know, it's kind of like a buzzkill. They get super. This is a real movie in the last 10 minutes. Like, you know, this is fun. We're having fun. Why do you gotta be so serious about it? So you guys balanced those really well, like the whole way through. And I thought both of those are important, and you guys did well on both.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Is there any kind of distribution that you're planning for this?
The distribution strategy is not yet nailed down, mainly because we've been holding distributors at arm's length at this point. We've had a lot of inquiries, a lot of folks who are really interested in this project, and we didn't want to show it until we knew we had gotten it where we wanted it to be. And so the majority of those distributors are, of course, out in LA, and so the plan has always been to have a rollout that gets us out to LA quick, so that we can then have those sit-downs with those distributors. So here at St. Lawrence, right, we've done our premiere here at St. Lawrence. We have coming up in a week 2 sold-out showings at the Chicago Comedy Film Festival, which is great.
Awesome.
I understand that that's a first for them, that they had you know, sold out, added a second screen, sold out. So that's a good thing. And then right after that, we hit the LA Comedy Film Festival. And so the LA Comedy Festival that's the one where we're gonna, you know, start to sit down with those distributors that we have in mind, and hopefully at that point we'll have some clarity on who we're going to work with on the distribution strategy, and, you know, where it'll be available for folks to see outside of the festival rollout. But we do plan to do a sizable festival rollout that we'd like to keep going over the course of, well, we have it planned for upwards of a year. We'll see if we actually
get there.
Stretch it out that long, but yeah, it'll be on the festival circuit for a while.
That's great. Well, thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks.
The movie's called Killing Poe. If you can see it in a film festival, I highly recommend it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Cool.